Stage 12 of the 2020 Tour de France is in the books, and today we headed from Chauvigny to Sarran, 218 kilometers, the longest stage of this year's edition of the race, and one of the few stages over 200k. We have a lot of shorter stages, which is kind of how the Grand Tours have been trending in recent years. However, everyone expected this to be a breakaway day. An early break did go, but a small group, including Nils Pollitt and Luis Leon Sanchez, who I'm sure would have been the strongest rider in that group, but they were not given a chance, chased down by Bora Hansgrohe. And as we hit the first climb of the day, the Côte de la Croix de Pays, many attacks went off the front of the peloton as the break were brought in, and included in that we had three Sunweb riders, including T.S. Benoot, Søren Kragh Andersen, and of course Marc Hirschi, who we have got to know so well in recent days. And a group behind them did form as well, with about 15 riders up the roads. No GC guys involved, so this was all for stage victory. And it was Bob Jungels of the Koenig Quickstep who was pacing really hard, trying to bring in the Sunweb guys alongside Schachmann, Soler and Quentin Pache, I think, at the front of the race. And that all made sense as Julian Alaphilippe attacks into the final climb of the day, the Souquemois, and he tried to join the group up the road, and he did in fact join Dries Devenens, his teammate, and he would try and bring Alaphilippe to the guys at the very front. But the issue with that is that Marc Hirschi had launched his attack. No one could stay with him. Kragh Andersen and Benoot did some work before Hershey attacked, and Marc Soler and Maxi Schachmann could not live with the young Swiss, 22 years old. He crested the climb, he had a downhill and a short rise to the finish, and he would go solo to the line, winning stage 12. After being heartbroken on Sunday, I said it then after that stage, if he did go on to win a stage at this tour, it would be a hugely popular result, and that has certainly proved to be the case. Marc Hirschi is a Tour de France winner. And so Bora Hansgrohe ended up doing a lot of work. Schachmann was caught, so they weren't even placed in the podium on the day. We actually had Pierre Rolland attacking for second place. We also had Søren Kragh Andersen rounding out the podium. So two riders from Sunweb on that podium today. But Bora Hansgrohe did most of the pacing early on, really preventing that breakaway from having a chance at the stage. And I think that was mostly for Peter Sagan, who in the end did stay in the peloton. A strong ride by Sagan, getting over some difficult climbs, and he finished 13th in the end. So picking up just a couple extra green jersey points right there. Not quite what he had in mind, I'm sure. So let's talk about Marc Hirschi and his abilities and how we really can expect him to develop in the coming years. So Marc Hirschi clearly is a very punchy rider, and on the shorter hills it seems that is where he is at home. He showed that on Col d'Ez, which was a shorter climb below 5 or 6 kilometers in length, because of course they didn't go to the top of Col d'Ez. And again, showing it today, it was a shorter climb that he attacked on, but very steep in sections. And even Maxi Schachmann, who has done super well in the Ardennes Classics previously, I think he's been on the podium in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and he couldn't live with Marc Hirschi today, showing just how strong Marc Hirschi can be on that hilly terrain. And I think that is his strongest suit as a rider. But you have to combine that with his superb downhill descending technique. He has to be considered really now as one of the top 5 descenders in the world. He put so much time into his competitors on pretty much all the descents he has done so far at this Tour de France. I remember at the beginning of stage 9, the stage he went on a 90k solo and was caught just before the line where Pogačar won. He tried to go off the front early in that stage, and he misjudged a downhill at the beginning of that stage, almost going completely off the road, just about saving himself. So he is an aggressive downhiller and clearly doesn't hold back, but he's not completely error proof. But clearly he is an exceptional descender and really is going to be hugely beneficial if he does go on to ride some of the Ardennes Classics and of course many other races. he rides later in his career. However, we have seen this Tour de France, which I don't think many people knew, even the guys that knew Marc Hirschi and had kind of followed his career to this point, how good he was at getting over the longer climbs as he has shown so far this Tour de France, and how good he is at riding on the flat section, because he doesn't seem to lose a lot of time when he's on the flat section. He really can hold a very nice TT position. I think he also rides with an aero TT bike a lot of the time. So that is something Marc Hirschi clearly has worked on a lot, staying as aero as possible when he is solo. So what can we expect from Marc Hirschi in terms of results and races he could be a challenger for in the future? Honestly, the sky has to be the limit right now, but I think going into next season, he has to be one of the favourites for the Ardennes Classics. Can he win an Amstel Gold, the Flèche Wallonne, or even Liège-Bastogne-Liège? I certainly wouldn't count him out in any of those races, and I'd certainly be looking at him as one of the favourites, judging by his form at this Tour de France. And can he be a winner of the Tour de France or stage races later in his career? I certainly think he can. Tour de France perhaps could be a push. We'll see how his long mountain climbing does develop, because he's not too heavy a rider. He's about 60 kilos according to Pro Cycling Stats. So perhaps he could well develop into a rider who can get over the longer climbs with the very best in the world as well. I can certainly see him contending for 1 week races, the likes of Criterium de Dauphiné and Paris-Nice Tirreno Adriatico. I think those races could really suit Marc Hirschi coming up in the future, and we'll see if he can turn himself into a Grand Tour contender. Anyhow, Peter Sagan did gain, I think, 2 points on Sam Bennett today, and he needs to eat into Sam Bennett's lead a lot more after his disqualification on stage 11, controversy on stage 11 with Sagan headbutting Wout van Aert. So he has a lot of work to do in the green jersey, and he can try and do some of that tomorrow in tomorrow's stage, I believe. So let's take a look at stage 13 of this year's Tour de France. We will be heading from the Châtel Guyon to Le Puy-Mary, and it's a super hilly, climby, mountainous day, whatever you want to call it. There are so many big climbs in tomorrow's stage, and it's certain that we're going to see some action in the GC. I'm sure of that. We have numerous climbs around 7 kilometers in length towards the beginning of the stage, and they lead into the first intermediate sprints, and I believe Peter Sagan has to gain as many points as possible at that intermediate sprint. Sam Bennett will not be gaining any points there, I can say that for certain, and Peter Sagan really needs to try and win that intermediate sprint, be it from the peloton or in the breakaway, so he can eat into Bennett's lead. It's sprints like this which are going to give Sagan a chance at beating Sam Bennett in the green jersey. But looking at the final for tomorrow's stage, we have the Col de Neron, which is 4 kilometers at 8.5% with a pretty large section as well, over 10%, and that is not even the final. That is a second category climb. We then go downhill for a very short amount of time before heading into the Pas de Pérols, which is 5.5 kilometers at 7.7%. However, the first really 3k of that climb are between around 4 to 6%, and the final kilometer to kilometer and a half range from around 10 to 15% on average. So the final kind of 2k, 1.5 kilometers of tomorrow's stage is going to be crazy. That is going to be a super difficult drag to the finish, a mountaintop finish, and we will see some big gaps, I believe, in the GC. And so first off, let's talk about the GC battle. I believe we will see the two Slovenians coming out on top again. It will be Roglic v Pogačar, and these shorter climbs, I've said it before, I'll say it again, these shorter climbs which are super steep suit these guys down to a T. It's the later stages where we have some potentially longer climbs where I see them maybe showing some signs of weakness. But who is going to come out on top between the two Slovenians? I'm not too sure. If I had to say, I may say Primož Roglic tomorrow. The steep gradient really does suit him. I think he has slightly better acceleration than Pogačar. I think Pogačar is a better sprinter, a better flat sprinter, but maybe on the hills, I think Roglic can just about attack away from Pogačar, but I no doubt expect those two guys to be the first two finishers out of the GC favourites. However, I cannot wait to see how Guillaume Martin, Romain Bardet, Nairo, we have Rigoberto Urán, and of course Egan Bernal. How is he going to perform? We also need to consider Mikhail Lanza, who had a great showing in the last GC battle on stage 9. He was able to follow the Slovenians. Will he be able to do it again or even attack them? If someone could from the GC, maybe it could be Lanza, because he is still 1 minute and 42 seconds down on Primož Roglic. And I will throw one more name in the mix with regards to the GC favourites, and that is Bauke Mollema. Currently sitting 13th in the GC, 2 minutes 31 down. He may be given some leeway, and this climb really does suit Bauke Mollema, another rider who I think is better on the slightly shorter and steeper climbs. So watch out for Bauke Mollema tomorrow. Despite all that though, I do think the stage win will be going to the breakaway tomorrow. I couldn't believe it wasn't the early breakaway going away today. Really strange how that turned out, with so many riders saying before the stage they thought the breakaway was going to win and they were going to try and get in that breakaway. I think they will go on to win tomorrow's stage, which does neutralise the bonification seconds as well. And two names I think could do really well from that breakaway are Dan Martinez. He won the Dauphiné less than a month ago. Of course, he fell on the descent of Col d'Ez, which really hampered his GC ambitions. EF Pro Cycling now have Rigoberto Urán as their sole leader in the GC, and Martinez is free to go for stage wins. And I certainly think he's been riding himself slowly back into the race and up to fitness again after that fall. He's recovered from that fall, and he could well be a name to go on and pick up the stage win tomorrow. Someone else as well is Leonard Kemner, another winner at the Dauphiné. He won stage 4 at the race, and I expect him to do the same tomorrow, or at least be there or thereabouts. He is given a lot of freedom now Bookman is out the GC battle. Bookman himself has said he is going to go for a stage maybe later in the race. I don't think tomorrow suits Bookman too well. I think he'll wait for the Alps where we have some longer climbs, and I think Bookman could potentially take a stage win once we get there. However, tomorrow, Leonard Kemner, definitely a name I'm looking out for in the breakaway. However, guys, Marc Hirschi is finally a winner at the Tour de France after coming so close on 2 occasions already. Just 22 years old. What a rider we have in the form of Marc Hirschi, and I cannot wait to see how his career progresses. But anyhow, let me know who you think is going to do well on stage 13 tomorrow at the 2020 Tour de France. If you enjoyed this podcast today, drop a like, good review, subscribe, follow, etc. depending which platform you are on. I will see you after tomorrow's stage.